When I was young, the state of anime in the US was very different. If you wanted to watch anime, you'd have to go on YouTube to find all three parts per episode or find a dedicated piracy website, and that's if the series even made its way to the US. I bring this up because one of the series that I watched during that time was Soul Eater. I didn't really read manga when I was younger, so Soul Eater's anime was the only knowledge I had of the series. I had a friend at the time who also watched the series, and for whatever reason, he told me that the manga was still ongoing, which, based on the release schedule, might have actually been true. But that he also told me that Maka dies in the manga. While I enjoyed the series, I felt the ending was pretty underwhelming, so I just left it in my past. Years later, in 2019, the anime for Fire Force started airing. David Production had just finished Golden Wind, and the trailer for Fire Force looked pretty interesting to me, so I decided to watch the first episode. I then read every chapter that was out at the time. At some point during my reading and research into Fire Force, I discovered that the mangaka for it is also the same one as Soul Eater. To be honest, I probably realized based off the art style, but at this point it doesn't really matter. While I did enjoy Fire Force, I did end up dropping it after a while because trying to keep up with it week to week as a Western fan was just a huge pain, but it did reignite my interest in Soul Eater. In the time between when I originally watched the Soul Eater anime and the release of the Fire Force anime, I had learned a few things about the Soul Eater manga. For one, Maka doesn't actually die, and I still don't really know why my friend told me that. The more important thing I learned is the ending in the manga is different. Soul Eater's anime came out in a time in the anime industry where studios would often rewrite the manga they're adapting, oftentimes heavily. This is where any anime fan my age or older would have heard the joke, the manga is better. I've become one of those manga readers in my adulthood, so when I was at Barnes& and Noble and I saw volume 1 of the perfect edition of Soul Eater, I decided to just buy it on a whim. Because Soul Eater is a finished series, I decided to wait until I owned the entire thing before I started reading it. Unfortunately, when I bought Volume 1 of the Perfect Edition, I hadn't realized that the Perfect Edition series wasn't fully out yet. Well, I hadn't read the series for this long. Now that I've read the entire series, what are my thoughts? Conflicted. To be clear, I love this series. The style and world building is even better than I remember from the anime, and only gets better during its run. The characters are fantastic, the world is incredible, and I really enjoyed the writing. Except for the ending. I guess history is repeating itself. The manga ending is much better than the anime. The manga finishes way more plot lines and feels far more coherent than the anime, but I still have two major issues with it. The first thing is, it felt like Okubo didn't really know how to end the series. While the manga definitely feels far more complete than the anime, it still leaves some things to be desired. The second major issue I have is a little more complicated. The original run of Soul Eater ran from 2004 to 2013, and while there was a spin off series called Soul Eater Not that ran near the end of Soul Eater's run, as well as another series that ties in, if you know, you know. I feel like the world has so much more room to expand. The majority of the series takes place around DWMA, which is just a small part of the world that Soul Eater has created. The lackluster ending just highlights my sadness that we still haven't gotten anything in a post Soul Eater world. Again, post Soul Eater. There was no follow up series that takes place after the events of Soul Eater. Three games released during the anime's original run, and those games are so unremarkable that they don't even have their own Wikipedia articles. Before I get into more specifics about the world of Soul Eater, let me just quickly go over the manga. Spoilers from this point onward.
The manga really is better. Will you read it?
Soul Eater serialized in Gan Comics, published by Square Enix. It features a gothic medieval world mixed with modern aesthetics and designs. The thing that most people know about Soul Eater is the Weapon Meister power system. Weapons are people who are able to turn into weapons, such as a sword, a scythe, or even a gun. Meisters are the people who wield these weapons and use their skills in handling and soul resonance to amplify the power of their partner weapon. The main characters are Maka Albarn and Soul Evans. Maka is a scythe meister whose father is the current weapon of death and whose mother is a very skilled meister herself. Soul is a scythe weapon that hails from a family of famous musicians. We also have Black Star, Tsubaki, Death the Kid, and sisters Liz and Patty. These seven are the lead cast with support characters like Sid, Stein, and Spirit. The main cast are students at DWMA, with Meister students looking to develop their weapon partner into a death scythe. Death scythes are weapons that have consumed 99 evil souls and one witch soul. If a weapon achieves this, then they are considered strong enough to be wielded by the headmaster of DWMA, Death. DWMA is a school built by Death to train weapons and meisters. The reason he built this school is to regulate the actions of weapons and meisters so that another Kishin isn't created. What's a Kishin, you may ask? Kishin are beings that are created when somebody consumes a large amount of good souls, becoming a twisted and warped monster of destruction. There's only been one Kishin in history, and DWMA acts as a prison for that one and only Kishin. Long before DWMA's creation, Death was the leader of a group called the Eight Reaper Legions. Another member, Asura, became obsessed with power and feared Death. Not Death the guy, like Death the concept. You get what I mean. Anyway, he started feeding the souls of good people to his partner weapon, eventually consuming his partner himself. Thus, the first Kishin was born. He caused immense destruction and was eventually stopped by Death. Not Death the concept, Death the guy, you know what I mean. Because Death was unable to kill him, he instead skinned him alive, drained him of his blood, and put his dried corpse into a sack created of his own skin. Death did not fuck around with him. This is why Death not only created DWMA and the surrounding Death City, but also why it's shown later that he can't leave Death City. From the moment that Death imprisoned Kishin, he has been using his own soul to anchor him, making him incapable of doing anything at all. The biggest strength that Soul Eater has for me is how fluid the power system is. Soul Eater has what's known as a soft magic system. This means that they don't have extremely specific rules on how the magic in the world works. A series like Full Metal Alchemist has extremely specific and rigid rules, which dictates how the story is told. By comparison, Soul Eater is very loose with its rules. We got ridiculous shit in here, like an immortal bearman anamorpher, and even a fully sentient zombie. That guy's not even a villain. That's Sid. He's one of the main supporting cast of the series. As an aside, Sid and his partner Mira have some of my favorite designs in the entire series. Tsubaki and her clan are the only weapons in the entire story that can transform into more than one weapon. Characters like Justin Law and Giriko are fully capable of fighting on their own without the help of a Meister. There's also the witches, which are the main antagonistic force of DWMA. By the end of the series, the witches and DWMA resolve to become allies and join forces to defeat the larger enemy Kishin and his army. Atsushi Okubo didn't want to be held to a specific rule set when it came to Soul Eater, and I feel like it just benefits from that. The Kishin is another great example of this power system in play. Asura, the original identity of Kishin, is actually a fragment of Death, which not only makes him a Reaper like Death, but also technically makes him the oldest son of Death. This is why he can't be killed, and also explains why he was able to be revived by Medusa. Medusa is a witch that infiltrated DWMA and was developing a substance that she calls black blood. This black blood causes anyone who gets it in their system to become much more resilient and powerful, but at the risk of developing madness. She created it with the sole purpose of reviving Kishin. The entire section leading up to Kishin's revival is probably my favorite part of the series. He's so effectively built up as this overwhelming and terrifying monster, and once we enter the room that he is imprisoned in, the series really just hammers that home. His madness is so overwhelming that his would be saviors nearly kill themselves because it's just that overwhelming. The best part is when the black blood is actually injected into the prison sack. The sack starts slowly shifting, with it starting to stretch back over his arms, his legs, and his head and his body. It's not only great paneling for the narrative, it's some really effective body horror. Okubo utilizes the flexibility of Soul Eater's world to create an incredibly unique and varied series. At this point, I hope I've showcased why this world is so interesting to me and why the way it ended is so frustrating. In the 12 years since it ended, we haven't gotten any sort of expansion or additional media for the series, and I think that's just a huge shame. Maybe that's unreasonable. The series was incredibly popular, and while I do think that the anime initially helped it, I feel that it probably hurt it in the long run. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the anime.
It's on you. Can you handle us? So cool, baby, scandalous.
Soul Eater's anime. Will they ever remake it?
Soul Eater's anime is about as frustrating as an anime from that era can be. Soul Eater's anime ran from 2008 to 2009, and as I mentioned before, that was an era within the anime industry where rewrites of adapted series were extremely common. Death Note had its entire second half, which in the manga was longer than the first, reduced so heavily that the second part of the anime is less than half the length of the first part of the anime. Fullmetal Alchemist saw so many rewrites that they readapted it to follow more closely with the manga. Soul Eater was one of the larger victims of this era. While Death Note's second half saw a significant reduction, it did still get adapted, and more likely it was rewritten because of how unpopular the second half was in the manga. Fullmetal Alchemist got Brotherhood, which made the first anime a bit redundant if you wanted a faithful adaptation of Fullmetal Alchemist. Soul Eater was not so lucky. While I was reading Soul Eater, it quickly became apparent to me that a large chunk of the series was never adapted. How much was missing, you may ask? This much. Yes. Out of the 17 Perfect Edition volumes, 6 were adapted. I don't know the numbers of the original volumes, I only know based off the Perfect Editions. This leaves 11 volumes of character progression, plot lines, and story beats that were never adapted. This meant that once they had to end the series, they had to do significant rewrites to make sense of what was left. Past those 6 volumes, Justin Law, who is a Death Scythe and one of the allies of DWMA, becomes a traitor due to the madness from Kishin, but because the anime never got that far, that just doesn't happen. Near the end of the series, Kid awakens as a full Reaper, which causes Death to die. But because that happens so late in the series, it never got adapted, so in the anime, Death is perfectly fine. DWMA and the witches squashing their beef happens later in the series, but because the anime never got that far, they're still enemies. This is a consistent theme with the anime. Because so much of the series never got adapted, the ending of the anime is unrecognizable compared to the manga. So many plot lines that start within these first 6 volumes are completed within the next 11, but because the anime never adapted them, they just get dropped and are left unanswered. It's so incredibly unfortunate because the parts that are faithfully adapted are fantastic. The studio that did the Soul Eater anime is Studio Bones, and they did as great a job as always. It's very likely that a lot of the issues with the Soul Eater anime came from management, because it's always management.
Hi there. Quick editor's note from myself. While I was talking about this with someone, they pointed out that the reason that they probably only adapted that much of the manga is possibly because that's just how much was out. For whatever reason, I didn't consider that at the time, but looking into it, the timeline does add up. Soul Eater released as a monthly series from 2004 onward, and the anime came out in 2008, and roughly about like 36 38 chapters were adapted, which would tie pretty closely to what was released at the time for the anime to adapt. So I don't know why I didn't really think of this. Obviously they're not going to be able to adapt later parts of the manga because it hadn't come out yet, but again, this just ties into how the anime industry was at that time. You know, there are a lot of modern series now that instead of rewriting what happens, they just wait for more of the manga to come out. So I don't know why I didn't think of that, but that is more than likely what happened. Is they just ran out of material, and rather than wait for more, they just ended it.
If I had to sum up my thoughts as succinctly as possible, it'd be this. Soul Eater is a series that had immense potential, and perhaps due to Square Enix, Okubo, audience response, or a mix of all of those, or maybe none of those, I feel the series didn't achieve the popularity it deserves. Again, this isn't to take away from the series' success. It was, and still is, very popular. By 2022, it had over 20 million copies of the manga in circulation. So to be clear, my stance isn't that Soul Eater is some unknown diamond in the rough. It's very known and has its place with all the other diamonds. I just wish that it had some spin offs or games that really expanded the worlds because I find the world of Soul Eater to be really special. Who knows? Maybe now that Fire Force is done, Okubo and Square Enix will take another look. Probably not, but here's hoping. Thank you for watching. Do you guys like this set? Hopefully not, because I'm never going to use it again. My friend's moving here, and so this is just his house. He's not here quite yet. I'm just using the space. This is his living room. It's never going to look like this again. So hopefully this didn't get your hopes up for a new set. I will be trying other things though. I've got some ideas in mind. If you've been watching my videos, I'm sorry for taking so many breaks. I've just got so many other things going on, and obviously this is just more of a hobby and just kind of a way to have, it's like an outlet for me to kind of get my thoughts out on random things like this. So I'm sorry if you have been enjoying my videos. I do plan to make more. It's just really hard to find the time, but I'm trying.